You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the first Air Raid Hour pregame show of the season. This one is a live premiere on tape delay due to some scheduling conflicts, but we are typically here live before every Buffalo Bills regular preseason and postseason game. So unfortunately, we won't be today, but my name is Judge Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Tilt Money. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys. This is the Air Raid Hour presented by the Cover One Sports Network. And Dave, football's back. It feels good. Part of me feels like it never left, but part of me feels like it's been a million years since we've done this thing.
It does. And, I was putting together the pregame show thumbnail for the YouTube video and was like editing it out. And I was like, man, it feels like it's been a while since I did one of these. And it felt good to do it and to actually put Colts at Bills on the graphic and see that there was like a real game that we were going to get to talk about. And, it's just preseason, but a lot to talk about. Every team, I think it's interesting, right? Like Hard Knocks premiered this week. That always gets me back in the mood for football, even when it's not my team. So you can feel it in the air. It's back. It's back.
The Jacksonville Jaguars are going to rue the day that they took Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. If anyone's seen Hard Knocks and seen how he got the team rolling with a rendition of Billie Jean there. But yeah, we love preseason football here at the Air Raid Hour. This is at our heart. This is a draft show, so we get to watch our babies go out and become men during the month of August here at the Air Raid Hour. I mean, we're recording this on a Thursday night, so we get the luxury of knowing that guys like Josh Allen aren't playing, Tavon Austin is questionable, Tyrell Dodson's not playing, etc. But I also have the Patriots Giants game on in the background. We get to watch some of our guys. My guy Tyquan Thornton with a touchdown. Randy Hartman's guy, Kevin Harris, just now with a touchdown. So this is our time of year. Before we get started, though, with the Bills talk and sort of break down what to expect from this game here this afternoon with the Indianapolis Colts, our show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. Hand-cut cup and char pepperonis. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, let's get right to it. And what we're going to do today is we're going to break down what we want to see on offense, what we want to see on defense, what we want to see on special teams. I think no one pays attention to special teams in the preseason like Bills Mafia. I have a bulleted list, like 8 things long that I want to see on special teams. And then we also obviously are going to do an abbreviated edited version of our pregame superlatives today. So obviously it's not the regular season. We're not going to predict a winner of this football game, but we'll get to that in a little bit with our superlatives and have a little fun towards the end of the show. But let's start with the offense. What are you looking for on offense from the Buffalo Bills? Josh Allen not playing. The assumption is probably going to be Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis probably not going to play, Dawson Knox, etc. What is your expectation, or what are you looking for? What are some things you're looking for from the offense in this game?
Yeah, a lot of things, like you said, had a lot of bullets written down. First thing that kind of comes to mind to me is kind of like a continuation of one of the things I was looking for when we started talking about what we were going to be looking for when training camp opened was the running back usage. And so one of the top things on my list for this game is not so much Devin Singletary, because I think it's pretty evident that he's locked in sort of as the number 1 running back for this team right now. But what is the running back usage going to look like in preseason game number 1 behind Devin Singletary? Zach Moss obviously listed as number 2 on the depth chart. James Cook, the second round pick. A lot of people are really excited to see him. Zach Moss, we expect to get first crack maybe at running back duties if Devin Singletary doesn't play much, which maybe he plays a series or two. But how much action is Zach Moss going to get in this game, and how much action is James Cook going to get in this game? And what's that split going to be like? Are we going to see any kind of indication of what James Cook may offer in the ground game? Are we going to see a combination of Zach Moss and James Cook maybe on the field at the same time? So this battle, I guess, behind Devin Singletary of between Zach Moss and James Cook for snaps, right? And specifically at the running back position, because I do think there'll be snaps available for James Cook. Otherwise, Zach Moss, I think it's an important year for him, right? He's come back. He's shown that physically it looks like he's ready to go. This could be a nice tone setter for a guy like Zach Moss early in the preseason to kind of say, hey, don't forget about me just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at that was the first thing I had in my notes was I want to see if this Zach Moss reclamation project is legit. He's been playing through, injuries his entire career. He just hasn't shown that same sort of mojo and swagger that he had in the Pac-12 at Utah that, we fell in love with in the pre-draft process. So I think that personally, I don't think Devin Singletary is going to play at all. I really don't think so. I mean, he got dinged up in that scrimmage. I think he's the clear-cut RB1, first and second down back at minimum. So I think Zach Moss is going to get a pretty solid run. I think you might see him play something like the whole first half. And I think that you'll probably see James Cook sprinkled in certain situations, but I only need to see James Cook for like 4 or 5 plays. I just want to get a feel for what he looks like in a Bills jersey. I don't know how much I want to see of him without Josh Allen on the field, but Zach Moss is exhibit A for me in the running game. And I expect to see a lot in the second half of Duke Johnson and Raheem Blackshear. I expect to see a heavy dose of those guys in the second half.
Yeah, and you raise a good point about James Cook, right? The Bills probably going to be cautious with him too, even though he's listed 3rd on the depth chart. You have to think they're going to be cautious with their, second round draft pick and knowing that he's going to be involved sort of multidimensionally in this offense, and Zach Moss needing to kind of prove what he can do. I agree with you. I think you see James Cook sprinkled in, give us a taste of maybe what he can do.
Yeah. Speaking of the running game, the first thing I had on my list too, as well, was I want to see the Buffalo Bills run block and I want to see them run block effectively. I want to see sort of what kind of mix they use, how much zone do they use, against how much like man gap power stuff, pin and pull stuff that they use. Maybe see a screen or two thrown in there. Maybe seeing some of that Aaron Cromer using the wide receiver to split in as sort of a lead fullback for your running back. Maybe we see a little bit of that sprinkled in. So I want to see some of the wrinkles to the Bills running game. And I just want to see them blocking effectively. They played in the scrimmage. They didn't play well in the scrimmage. Joe B was tracking the running backs yards per carries, and it wasn't great. It was less than 3 yards per carry. So I know the Buffalo Bills have a very good defensive line. I just want to see our guys do it against another team to see for myself that maybe it's just because our defensive line is really that good. But I also don't expect a lot of the projected starters or even like the top reserves. Like I don't expect to see Quessenberry. I don't expect to see Spencer Brown, Dawkins, Saffold, Bates, Morse. I really don't expect to see any of these guys. The top 6, maybe even 7 guys. Manx is dinged up. He's missed a lot of practice. Might not even see him in this game. So what are your expectations when it comes to what we're going to see from the offensive line?
Well, that was a question I had just written down. It's like, what offensive line are we going to see go out there first, right? Because it's expected that you would expect like guys like Dawkins and even Spencer Brown, probably with him coming back from injury, probably not going to really play. And maybe even Mitch Morris isn't so I'm questioning like, okay, well, we've had to shuffle the offensive line all throughout training camp because of injuries. Like, who is going to be the unit that goes out there first? And by the way, reading, took some time to read some of the beat reports out of Colts camp, today, and their reports are sounding quite similar to what we've heard out of Bills camp in regards to their defense really being a step ahead of their offense as well. So this Bills offensive line that is going to play, whether it's against the Colts, some of their starters maybe for a little bit or mostly reserves, are still going to have their hands full. And this is going to be a good chance for guys like, Tommy Doyle and guys like Cody Ford and even maybe a guy like Greg Van Roten to make an impression during this game to potentially kind of maneuver their way around the depth chart, given, hey, had all this shuffling now in training camp, maybe preseason game number 1 for some of these reserves kind of like gives the coaches a little bit more confidence in kind of how to handle practice reps after this game. So offensive line play, one of the biggest question marks we had anyway going into the season, but of course into this preseason game with a lot of starters not playing, going to be really interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this Colts depth chart, they got a pretty good starting caliber defensive line: Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Yannick Ngakoue. After that, it gets shakier, but they still got some dudes and some names and some higher draft picks, all sprinkled throughout the second, third, and fourth team. So it should be a decent challenge. I could come out here and say I want to see Cody Ford, but I don't want to see Cody Ford. So I'm just going to skip over that. Like, hopefully he doesn't go out in there and embarrass himself. Maybe he goes out there and makes a few plays and he truly is the reclamation project that some people thought he could have been under Aaron Cromer. But I'm really interested in seeing Tommy Doyle on the edge against some live bullets. I mean, he was such a project and he looked so bad last preseason. And every time he stepped on the field to play offensive line, not additional tight end last year, he didn't look great. So I'm really interested to see him on the edge versus live bullets. And I'm curious to see if maybe they even play him a little inside at guard too. And I just want to see it. I just want to see that 6'9" dude out there playing guard. And I also think the center rotation behind Greg Manx, if Greg Manx doesn't play, is going to be interesting. Jacob Capra is going to get a lot of run. And then Derek Kierstetter is probably going to get a lot of run as well. But Tommy Doyle, Luke Tenuta, Alec Anderson, Tanner Owen, Derek Kierstetter, there's a lot of guys to keep an eye on, throughout. A lot of, balls of clay on that offensive line and the lower half of that offensive line, and see who's evolving quickly and who's still in need of some development and who maybe won't be there at all. I know Joe B just came out with his first 53-man roster projection, and he had Luke Tenuta making the final 53, which shocked me. So I'm really interested to see Luke Tenuta as well.
It's really interesting, right? Because a lot of people hate the preseason, but for players, right, that are fringe roster players or guys that really need to make a name for themselves, having one fewer preseason game really hurts them, I think. And so, like, every rep, even though it's preseason game number 1, and typically in preseason game number 1, you see very minimal play from, your upper echelon guys. It's still one less game for your lower echelon guys and your bottom of the roster guys. So, like, even in preseason game number 1 for guys like Tenuta and guys behind Manx, right, like Kierstetter, you mentioned, it's important for these guys to kind of show up in this game because there's one fewer, game and 70, 80 snaps for them to potentially have. So yeah, big important for some of these reserve offensive linemen.
So Josh Allen not playing in this game. So typically you would say to yourself, like, all right, like, well, we're just going to get sort of like a really uneven football game with a lot of runs, and it's going to be super boring. But if you look at the Bills depth chart, which most of you in Bills Mafia have, it's like the back of your hand, there's a lot of veteran quarterbacks on this Buffalo Bills depth chart. It's not, there's no Tyree Jackson or Jake Fromm or Davis Webb. It is Matt Barkley and it is Case Keenum, two guys who have been there, done that. I expect Case Keenum for a couple of drives. And then my expectation is Matt Barkley's going to be playing a lot of football this preseason.
Yes, he is.
Matt Barkley will probably get about 3/4 in of this football game. And I love it. I'm a huge fan of just Matt Barkley. He's not very good, but I like the guy. So I like to go and watch out. I like to go and watch him go out there and sling it. And he's shown sort of in these like blue and red scrimmages and stuff that, like, when he's out there against backups, he's a dude. So it's going to be fun. But that's really not the talking point. The talking point is the guys that they'll be throwing it to, right. Whether it's the wide receivers or it's the tight ends. You're not likely going to see a lot of Stephon Diggs. You're not likely going to see a lot of Gabriel Davis or Dawson Knox. I doubt we even see a lot of OJ Howard. So what are your thoughts on like McKenzie and Crowder's usage? That's something to probably keep an eye on, right?
It is, but the way things are sounding and the way Josh Allen's talking about Isaiah McKenzie, wouldn't really be surprised if you didn't see a lot of Isaiah McKenzie in this game either, right? I think you will see some Crowder early, and I think guys like Shakir, guys like Isaiah Hodgins, guys like Jake Kumaro are going to get a lot of playing time in this game. Tanner Gentry is going to get playing time, so it becomes a really, the battle that becomes important is what we kind of hinted in the last show, is like this Isaiah Hodgins sort of rise as far as at least the reports at a practice. Can that translate into real, production on the field, albeit in a preseason game with someone like Keenum or Barkley throwing it to him? He's got to show something, right? Because as it stands right now, it's going to be tough to unseat Jake Kumaro from that last receiver spot. And we don't know, obviously, Tavon Austin questionable. He's not going to give you much in the receiving game, but this wide receiver competition at the bottom between Hodgins and Kumaro and Gentry and like Shakir, although he's going to make the team, it's really interesting because there's a camp of people who really want to see what Isaiah Hodgins can do because he was the draft pick, and there's this thought there's a little bit more upside with him as a receiver, but then there's the steadiness of Jake Kumaro as the special teamer and that sort of that veteran that's kind of been in the league and played and has kind of cut his chops playing special teams. So fascinated to see how we can get some, in my notes, I wrote competent in quotation marks quarterback play to show what some of these receivers can do.
Yeah, it's, on the McKenzie Crowder thing, I think you're right. The way Josh Allen's talking about Isaiah McKenzie, I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, we saw a ton of Isaiah McKenzie last preseason. Like, he was like one of Mitch Trubisky's go-to guys whenever Mitch was out there. I wouldn't be surprised now that now that you mention it, if he just doesn't see a lot of snaps. And it'll be interesting if McKenzie is sitting on the bench and Jamison Crowder gets some run. That will be interesting. If Jamison Crowder plays like legitimate snaps, I know the Buffalo Bills are low at receiver. Diggs is probably not going to play. Davis is not going to play. McKenzie probably won't play, as you mentioned. Tavon Austin is questionable with an injury. Stevenson's hurt. They're low in numbers. I'm honestly surprised they haven't picked somebody up off the waiver wire at this point. The two positions that are lowest at is safety and wide receiver heading into this first preseason game. But if Crowder plays a lot of snaps or a significant number of snaps, that could mean that his job is legitimately on the line. Now, I don't think that's the case, and I don't think we're going to see that. I'm expecting with Case Keenum to see Hodgins, Kumaro, Shakir, with Kumaro at the X, Hodgins at the Z, and Shakir in the slot. I think that would be a really interesting combination of 11 personnel. But after that first quarter, when Keenum comes out, I'm expecting Isaiah Hodgins to get a ton of run, as you mentioned. I'd be disappointed if Isaiah Hodgins doesn't play like practically this entire football game from start to finish.
Agreed.
And once Shakir, who is in the punt returner battle and has also been banged up in camp and is a 5th round pick, once he's out of there, and once Kumaro, whose value is special teams, is likely out of there after the first quarter, it's just Hodgins, it's Tanner Gentry, and it's Neil Powell. So I'm expecting to see those three the most. So I think a lot of fans are really pumped and want to see Shakir and all this stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if after the first quarter, it's down to those three: Hodgins, Gentry, and Powell.
Wouldn't be surprised. We see a lot of Tommy Sweetie, Jalen Wydermyer, Quentin Morris, like
11 personnel or
really,
12 personnel. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, cause like you said, the receiver numbers are dwindling, and that would be about the point in time too, where you might see a lot of Raheem Blackshear and Duke Johnson as well.
And that's interesting too, because you have so many players. Duke Johnson can flex out. Raheem Blackshear can flex out. Quentin Morris could probably play the slot. So there are a ton of guys who can have some flexibility. How creative the Bills want to be in the second half of a preseason opener, I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see some of those guys get to spread their wings and some of those guys get to prove themselves in these situations. But speaking of tight ends and maybe going with a lot of 12 personnel in this football game because of our lack of wide receivers, next on my notes is feed Tommy Sweeney. I want to see this dude targeted a ton. I want to see him be like the focal point, one of the focal points of the offense while he's on the field. And I know that sounds stupid and that sounds silly, but we've had this conversation all training camp. Do the Buffalo Bills carry a third traditional tight end? Not the Reggie Gilliam, but the third traditional tight end between Knox and OJ Howard. And Tommy Sweeney is a coaching staff favorite. Tommy Sweeney is a favorite in that locker room. Tommy Sweeney seems to have good training camp after good training camp after good training camp. But then he gets into these games and he gets the drops and all these different things happen. And he's inactive for extra offensive linemen throughout most of the regular season. We only carry one tight end. So I want to start seeing it from Tommy Sweeney in game like situations. Feed that guy the ball in this preseason opener.
Feed him the ball and just generally let's see what happens at this tight end battle behind Dawson Knox and OJ Howard. Can one of these guys, and can it be Tommy Sweeney, really make the case for the Bills to keep that third true tight end? Jalen Weidermeyer, a guy that was high on draft boards, tested poorly, dropped down, but in the games he played, I would say he's more of a gamer than he is probably a practice type player or a testing type player. So can he make himself, can he make himself seen in the chances that he might get? And obviously Quentin Morris has now been here for a year and he has a little bit of a cult following as well. So generally speaking, even beyond Tommy Sweeney, I'm really interested to see, can one of these guys separate themselves from the pack, and not even just enough to separate themselves from one of the other guys, but enough for the Bills to really even consider keeping them on the roster. That's kind of a double, a double dip, if you will, into this sort of whole tight end story. So I like the idea of feeding Sweeney or whoever it may be. And you're right. Like, this is kind of Sweeney's last stand, I feel like. So let's see what he can do.
All right, let's transition now over to the defense. What are you looking for on defense? Like, what is the first thing you're going to have your eyes on when the Buffalo Bills defense takes the field this afternoon?
Yeah, so I have like 5-6 different notes. The first note I have is how does Kaiir Elam hold up, right? I know that
Oh, yeah.
I know that it would be a shock if Michael Pittman played a ton, right? Obviously in this game. I'm not sure if Paris Campbell's even going to play. I think he's been banged up. But hey, we could have a rookie on rookie matchup here in this game for a little while between Alec Pierce and Kaiir Elam. So a good test for him as a rookie, potentially, to go up against another rookie, a guy maybe a little bit more on his same playing field, right? From an experience standpoint, although with the height, right? So Elam's been battling Diggs all throughout training camp. How is he going to hold, how could he hold up maybe against a guy like Alec Pierce, who's also a rookie going through the learning curve, just like Kaiir Elam is? I think a lot of people will be looking at how Kaiir Elam holds up. I just don't know how long he's going to play in this game, knowing that Trey White still isn't technically all the way back yet. I think the Bills are going to be cautious with him, but I do hope in a way that he gets tested early. They did say Matt Ryan was going to play about a quarter in this game. I wouldn't mind a guy like Matt Ryan, who's been here, done that in the NFL, testing Kaiir Elam out, like throwing to his side, seeing, Matt Ryan doesn't really have anything to lose in this situation. So that's number one on my list. I want to see how Kaiir does against someone other than like Stephon Diggs.
I'm not going to lie to you. I want to see backups at every position but cornerback. Like, I don't want to see any of our top 4 DTs play. I don't need to see Rousseau. I don't need to see Von Miller, Edmonds, Milano, obviously Trey, Poyer, Hyde, even Teron Johnson. I don't need to see any of them, but
Agree.
Number one on my list was, I wrote Elam, Jackson, Benford, who steps up with live bullets.
Yep.
And I would love to see these 3 guys rotate throughout the entire first half of this football game. I know that's a lot for the first preseason game, but I think these dudes need it. I really do think that they need the snaps. They need the reps. So I would love to see through the entire first half of this football game versus Matt Ryan and another veteran in Nick Foles, Kaiir Elam, Dane Jackson, and Christian Benford play almost the entire first half, a 3-man rotation on the boundary there. And you mentioned Alec Pierce. I think he's going to be a tough. Guy to go up against in a nice little challenge. He was giving Stephon Gilmore the business in training camp. They just posted a clip of Alex Pierce in the red zone, just absolutely working Stephon Gilmore. So I think it's going to be a good challenge for some of these young corners that the Bills have. And I just want to see who steps up, even though it's the preseason, with these live bullets, and every rep for these guys is so important.
It really is. And one of the storylines that's kind of interesting to me that I've kind of maybe fabricated in my own mind is, Kaiir Elam's been getting beat up by Stephon Diggs, right, throughout training camp. And there's been some good reports on him, right? But like, there hasn't been a ton of reporting on Kaiir Elam other than him kind of going up against Diggs and some of the quotes. Lately, there has been a lot of love
Oh
thrown
yeah.
Benford's way. And so I wonder if there's a little bit of like, okay, Kaiir Elam's seeing all this love. Benford now is maybe a little bit of the darling, not saying he's supplanting Kaiir Elam by any means, but I'm just saying, let's see how he does against live bullets, as you mentioned. Let's see how each of these guys does against live bullets, because I would expect that Kaiir would hold his own maybe a little bit better than Benford would against real live action, but we will see. It's a very interesting storyline because there is a lot of love being thrown Benford's way
Oh
right
yeah.
now.
I mean, it was you had the Athletic Football Show was talking about Christian Benford, their podcast. They had guys there at camp. You had NFL Network. We're all talking about him and bringing him up on a lot of their shows. So a lot of people are starting to throw Christian Benford's name around. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler had some interesting comments on Kaiir Elam that recently came out. He was at Buffalo Bills training camp, and this is the quote that Jeremy Fowler had on Kaiir Elam. Elam has battled well throughout training camp while learning some new techniques. He was mostly a press man corner at Florida, and the Bills have worked with him on his off coverage, which takes time to learn. To me, that tells me that like the repetition, live bullets. I really hope that he sees a lot of playing time, but it also does too look like Trey White will be back before week 1. We might even see Trey White back in practice before the regular season kicks off. Jeremy Fowler also reporting the Bills expect Trey White back sooner than later, and that they're also not very interested in anyone on the free agent market. So it's these 3 guys who are going to have to step up. But beyond them, Cam Lewis, I wouldn't be surprised to see him starting in the nickel. I think Saran Neal is almost to a point where you're not going to see a lot of Saran Neal in the preseason because he's a bona fide special teamer and he just sort of knows his role when he has to fill in the defense, but we might still see some Saran Neal. Obviously, Tim Harris, Elijah Griffin, Jamarcus Ingram round out the cornerback position, and maybe even Nick McLeod gets some reps at corner. So it's just going to be interesting to see who is used where, how long certain guys play. Anything else sort of in the depth cornerback? I forgot Jordan Miller, the guy who signed from the University of Washington. Anything else stick out to you? Cam Lewis and Nick McLeod has been our talking point on this show and talking point on many people's shows.
Yes, I mean
throughout the summer.
Slot corner, obviously you mentioned it with presuming Saran Neal's not really gonna play there. Who's the kind of first guy up? Expecting Taron Johnson not to play really much of it at all in this game. Who can maybe solidify themselves as maybe a reliable slot corner option? This Cam Lewis, Nick McLeod battle could be interesting. Will they give McLeod a chance to play in there? Will Elijah Griffin maybe show something from the slot as he's listed there on the depth chart? We will see. But you have to think, at least for now, Cam Lewis has the edge up given his call up last year and sort of his tenure with the team. But nothing else really of note. I think we touched on pretty much everything there with the corners.
Safeties is going to be really interesting too. I mean, you're probably going to see Jaquan Johnson and DeMar Hamlin start at safety.
Yep.
Wouldn't be surprised if they get a majority of the first half, and then it's likely going to be Josh Thomas and Nick McLeod. I don't know whether to be excited for Nick McLeod because of his versatility to play safety and things like that, or to feel a little bit bad for him because it seemed like he was in the mix at cornerback, and then injuries to Hyde and Poyer sort of forced his transition to safety, maybe before a lot of people had planned on him making that transition. What are your thoughts on the safety position and what to look for there?
Yeah, I mean, I had noted, Johnson and Hamlin, right? Like, are we going to see maybe something that shows us that they've kind of maybe taken the next step? Maybe they get into that sort of Dean Marlowe-esque, range of trust, if you will. I'm very excited to see DeMar Hamlin play because ultimately we really don't ever get to see him play in regular season situation. And as being such a big fan of him, like, I will take watching him play in the preseason if it means I get to watch him play at all. And I'd like to see him make a splash, play here or there. I think one of my hot takes going into last preseason that DeMar would have 2 interceptions during the preseason. Obviously didn't happen, but I'm very curious to see if maybe he plays with a bit more confidence this year now going into year 2. I'm just excited to see him play and to watch him play.
Yeah, I love all of those depth players. Like there are so many likable guys in the Buffalo Bills secondary depth competition, whether it's DeMar Hamlin, who, we both loved and you beat the drum for in the pre-draft process, Jaquan Johnson, even Josh Thomas last year. Like Josh Thomas, just he was the last man cut last year. Like he almost made this football team
Yep.
the way he balled out in the preseason. And then Nick McLeod obviously played so well last preseason at corner. He got snagged by the Bengals and he's back here. So the combination of those 4 guys, Cam Lewis, Elijah Griffin, just a lot of guys to root for in that secondary, and just a lot of guys, maybe hopefully one of them makes a play. And, it should be super interesting, but it's hard for DB sometimes to make plays if the pressure ain't there up front. And the Buffalo Bills are expected to get a heavy dose of pressure on the quarterback in 2022, but I don't know how much of that you're going to see in the preseason. I don't think you're going to see any possible exotic new looks. I doubt you'll see Von Miller. I doubt you'll see even Gregory Rousseau. Maybe you'll see a little bit of Gregory Rousseau. I'd prefer not to. I'd prefer not to see Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, Daquan Jones. Save them for week 1. I don't need to see them take a snap in the preseason. But the 3 guys that I have my eyes on are 3, 4, and 5 on the depth chart at defensive end for the Buffalo Bills, because we know how important that rotation is to them. AJ Epinesa is apparently looking the best he's ever looked. We've heard that before, though. Boogie Basham has slimmed down, wearing 55 now, so that's going to take some getting used to. And a guy who's been quiet all training camp, but maybe can start making a name for himself with some live reps in the preseason, Shaq Lawson. Those are the 3 guys that I have my eye on the defensive line. What are you expecting from the defensive line here in the first preseason game?
Well, I think you hit it right. I don't know that the pressure the pressure that we expect throughout the regular season is that's not obviously going to be there this game, but guys like Epinesa and Basham in moments could flash that, right? And I do think that while it's probably not as important for Boogie Basham, I think it's really important for AJ Epinesa to show something in this game. And I want AJ Epinesa to play with a little bit of fire in this game. I want him to show a little emotion in this game. And I want him, ultimately, I wouldn't mind seeing him outplay Boogie Basham just in this particular game, just for the sheer optics of it and his confidence going into the regular season. I think it's an important year for him overall. So I think if he can build up some confidence through some solid play in the preseason, that could go a long way for him in the regular season, kind of building on that. So I am, if you're talking about the defensive front, I agree with you. Don't play any of those starters, but Epinesa, Basham, really interested in seeing sort of how they fare. Shaq Lawson's interesting. Like, I don't know that you're going to notice him a lot, I guess it's not a disrespect to him, right? It's just that's the type of player he is. He's going to be solid. He's going to be steady, but I think that's what he's here for, right? He's here to set the edge in the running game. I don't think he's here to necessarily generate a ton of pressure, in pass rush situations, but he probably will get a lot of playing time in this game. So,
yeah. Some other names to keep an eye out for: Mike Love, one of my favorite players, and Brandon Bryant, another one of my favorites. I like both of those guys as rotational pieces, and I'm still convinced that on any other NFL roster, Brandon Bryant is a DT4 and Mike Love is a defensive end 4 or 5. Like, I do think that they are NFL roster quality football players. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do anything to, back up what I'm saying in the preseason and play well in the preseason. But the better they play in the preseason, the more likely we run the risk of losing them to another football team. So maybe a quiet preseason from them would be good. Eli Anku has come off of the physically unable to perform list. How much he plays today, I don't know, only being back to practice for 2-3 days with that injury. We're likely going to get a heavy dose of these bottom of the roster dudes, whether it's Joseph or Jonathan or Emili or CJ Brewer. There are some interesting guys there, like guys like Kingsley Jonathan from Syracuse, Prince Emili from Penn, CJ Brewer from Coastal Carolina. Like, they're guys who, we always read their scouting reports as fringe UDFA guys, and and they were interesting prospects and they got interesting tools. So it'll be fun to see if any of those guys step up this preseason. But we've gone through the defensive line, we've gone through the secondary. So let's get to linebacker. Not expecting to see a lot of Edmonds, not expecting to see a lot of Milano. Tyrell Dodson's been ruled out. He's just some general soreness he's been working through. That's what they call it in the preseason now. Like you pull something or like whatever, they just call it general soreness.
General soreness. Yeah.
So Tyrell Dodson's dealing with some general soreness right now. So to me, all eyes are on Terrell Bernard and Balon Spector. But what are you looking for from the linebackers in this preseason game?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, based on how the depth chart looks, I would expect that Terrell Bernard's the starting Mike, and if we're
Spector's
going to be,
starting well.
yeah, exactly, and
Mhm.
that could be who you see for a lot of this game. And again, this is another one of those positions, kind of like receiver right now, where especially if Edmonds and Milano
Yeah.
aren't going to play, I mean, this is a lot of Terrell Bernard and Balon Spector playing time. Now, you're going to see a lot of Joe Giles Harris, Markel Lee, and Tyler Matakevich, I think, and maybe less so Matakevich, but I think you will see a lot of Markel Lee in this game, a lot of Joe Giles Harris, and I think Bernard and Spector will have a chance to make some plays early in the game, and I think it'll be nice, I think, if they could show some decent play while Matt Ryan's still sort of in the game in the first quarter. Going against a guy who is very experienced, former MVP, getting those reps against Matt Ryan, I think is nice for these guys. And Balon Spector potentially giving himself a really, really more than, high probability chance to kind of solidify his roster spot potentially.
So Balon Spector has really cooled off in training camp. Joe B had him as one of his final roster cuts. Had him not making the final roster. He only had the Bills keeping 5 linebackers, which is not something they've done the last couple of years. So that was really interesting. He said there's just too much talent other places in the football field. You mentioned Giles Harris, Markel Lee, Andre Smith. They're going to get a ton of run. I agree, but I hope they don't get that run until the second half. Like I really do hope, and I don't know how realistic it is, but I really do hope that the entire first half, it's Jaquan Johnson and Damar Hamlin at safety. It's the 3 guys I mentioned rotating at cornerback. It's Terrell Bernard, and it is Balon Spector. I want to see these guys not just get 2-3 series. I want to see them get a full half or maybe into the second half. Like I want to see them get significant run and significant reps. So Bernard and Spector are right up there with guys I want to see get a ton of reps. So while I like Joe Giles Harris, while I like Markel Lee, while I like Andre Smith, I really hope we do not see them until the second half. I'll be disappointed if we see them in the first half, and I'll be even more disappointed if they're starting. I really want to see Bernard and Spector out there. They were your draft picks. They're the guys you're high on. Spare me they got to earn it BS. Like I understand they have to earn it, but that's the sending the messages is for the depth chart. I want to see these guys play. So
right. I mean, and they need to see them play.
The depth chart might say one thing. I want them to physically do something else when they get on the football field.
Very interesting as you start to kind of like piece together this second team defense for the Bills, which is kind of like looking like that's going to be the main unit to start this game. It's a very intriguing unit, right? You mentioned guys like Mike Love. We talk about Epinesa and Basham. Then we're talking about Bernard and Spector in the at the linebacker position, Hamlin and Johnson at like, and then Jackson and Kyrie. Like it is, this second team defense is like pretty exciting, actually. Like it's pretty exciting to think about it, and like you start going through every layer of it, and you're like, wow, that's actually a really deep defense.
Yeah, I mean, like realistically, we can see start the game left to right. Boogie Basham, Ilianku, Brandon Bryant, and AJ Epinesa with Bernard and Spector behind them. And then in the secondary, Johnson, Hamlin at safety, and then Elam, Dane Jackson, Christian Benford rotating at corner, and Saran Neal and Cam Lewis rotating in the nickel. That's a lot of talented football players. And the ones who maybe aren't as talented or as young as the others are fringe 53-man roster football players. So super exciting what the Bills have the possibility to bring out. And then even when they get to the third team, it's still like Giles Harris and Markel Lee, who are legitimate, like bottom of the roster NFL players. It's fun to watch. And it's always fun seeing too in the fourth quarter, jumping in a time machine to 1994 and watching Tyler Matakevich play defense. Like it's literally Tyler Matakevich. I will say this every year until he retires. if Tyler Matakevich was born 15 years sooner, he probably would have been a Hall of Famer. I mean, I'm just being real. I'm just being honest here. Like if that dude played ball in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, he's a Hall of Famer. I mean, 100%. With that beard, with that attitude, he's a Hall of Famer.
He's
First
like,
ballot. First ballot.
I mean, at least like he's found a home, right? He's found a niche. He's like the Kavika Mitchell of our time now. Like from when we signed him, remember that? We're like, oh, he's gonna be good. And he was just a big kind of like bulky guy, and it just never really fully worked out. But yeah.
All right.
I like him, but yeah.
Let's move to special teams now. And you got a ton to choose from. The holding, the holder, the punter battle, the kick and punt return battle, gunners, etc. What's the first thing you're going to have your eye on when the special teams takes the field? What are you looking for?
I mean, you nailed it. The 3 bullets I have here are the holding from Matt Ariza and punting, obviously.
Yeah.
Who's returning punts? Obviously, Tavon Austin's situation, right?
Yeah.
He may not play in this game. So who's the first one out there? Is it going to be Duke Johnson?
I hope it's Shakir.
Is it going to be Khalil Shakir? You'd like to think it's going to be Shakir. And then kick return is interesting because in the preseason, are you more likely to see somebody kind of try to return a kick? Probably so, right? To try to make something happen. Because it's not going to be Isaiah McKenzie, I doubt, back there, right, to start this. Yeah. So is it going to be Duke Johnson back there? Is James Cook going to get a chance to return a kick in this game? And are the Bills comfortable?
I hope not.
With James Cook returning a kick. I wouldn't be. I'd throw Duke Johnson back there the whole game if it was me. And that's what I would do. So I'm going to be interested to see how they play that out. And then the punt return battle, obviously, I mentioned Shakir, I hope is the first guy out there, but wouldn't be surprised if Duke Johnson ends up being like a main return guy in both situations all game.
It's crazy. So I'm hoping that Shakir is the first one out there returning punts if Tavon Austin doesn't play, because Tavon Austin is questionable. After that, I think, like you said, Duke Johnson is probably going to do a lot of the kick and punt returning this preseason. But I hope that Raheem Blackshear gets thrown out there as well, both as a kick returner, as a punt returner. I think that'll be fun to watch in the fourth quarter, give Raheem Blackshear a chance to return some kicks and some punts. So that should be fun to watch as well. But I think the Tavon Austin injury sort of deflated it a little bit. But it gives Khalil Shakir a chance to run away with it. If Khalil Shakir can run away with it, we can keep 6 wide receivers, or if we keep a 7th wide receiver, that receiver can be Isaiah Hodgins. We can keep Tommy Sweeney on the roster if we are able to get rid of a Tavon Austin and not have to have that gadget guy on the roster. So it'll be interesting to see. The only report I read on Shakir punt returning this preseason was this training camp was the day he had a bad day and bobbled a bunch of punt returns. So hopefully we don't see anything like that from the returner battle, but 100% going to have our eyes on that returner battle. And then the punter battle, I might just have my stopwatch out while I'm watching the game, clocking that hang time. And no shanks. We can't see any shanks from our boy Matt Ariza. So what are you looking for in the punter battle?
Well, it's interesting because I believe when we saw some of these hang time calculations being tallied, like the hang times are actually quite similar between Ariza and between Hawk. But I'm looking for the consistency, number one, right? No shanks, like you said. And I'm looking for that juice from Ariza. Like, can he translate what he's been doing in practice? Like, there was a video today that came out. I forgot who posted it. Might have been John Scott or someone else about, Ariza punting a 75-yard ball 75 yards in the air today, or might have been yesterday. I think it was today. Can that translate into a game, right? I'm not expecting him to punt the ball 75 yards in a game, but can I see some consistency with the power, with the power that he's been kind of like, at this point, that's his reputation. So is that going to show through in a game? And I want to see him run away with it and make it a no doubt decision for the punter battle. And
speaking of special teams, like I said, no team is going to be watching special teams more intently than Bills Mafia. A team whose roster is so stacked, I guess this is where you have to do most of your watching. But we're on holder watch as well.
Holder watch.
I'm going to be like, this is going to sound weird, but every time the camera pans over to Tyler Bass, I want to read his body language
with whoever's holding his kicks? Like, is he getting visibly frustrated with anyone holding his kicks? Does he seem more confident with people who are holding his kicks? I want to see his comfort
after
level.
kick handshake with each guy?
Yeah, what does that look like? Like, I want to see Bass's comfort level with these guys who are holding for him. I also want to watch the gunner battles, because obviously I think I personally want Taiwan Jones to be on roster bubble watch. Saran Neal's got one of those spots sealed up. Taiwan Jones seemingly has the other spot sealed up, but whether it's Raheem Blackshear, it's Christian Benford, it's Dane Jackson, it's Cam Lewis, it's Nick McLeod, I'm really going to be watching the gunners intently to see who's gunning and when they're gunning, to see who might be Taiwan Jones's top competition. Be watching the guys who are the personal protectors, because maybe they have an edge if they're the personal protector. And then all eyes on Isaiah Hodgins, because again, Joe B in his latest 53-man roster projection, he's the first person I've seen to put Isaiah Hodgins on the 53, but he made him his 7th wide receiver. And he said that when Trey White comes off the physically unable to perform list, he's the first guy to get cut. He was the last person who made the football team. So that says a lot about the training camp Isaiah Hodgins is having. He's putting it together even when the pads are on, when in years past, he sort of disappeared when the pads go on. So kudos to him for continuing to build and develop his career and progress. But if he can't beat out Jake Kumaro, who's a 4-phase special team monster on special teams, or come within the margin of error, it's going to be very difficult for him to make this football team. And I'm a big fan of Isaiah Hodgins, so all eyes are going to be on Isaiah Hodgins as well. Any final thoughts here on special teams?
No, it's a great point, but I'm not going to say too much because I'm going to have some comments in the superlatives that kind of dovetail into this.
We just spent 5 times more allotted minutes talking special teams than any team's pregame show will in the history of man. Not only that, we're already at the 46-minute mark and just getting to superlatives. This might be the longest preseason pregame show of all time, too, by the way, if we can get to that 60-minute mark. I don't think anybody's doing hour pregame shows for the first preseason game. So, Bills Mafia, we love that you
and that's without comments, too, by the way.
Yeah. All right, so let's get to the superlatives. Yep. Obviously, people who watch the show regularly know our first superlative is always the take me higher player of the game. The one exception is we can't pick Josh Allen. Number 1, breaking. We can no longer use the Creed clip due to copyright infringement, unfortunately. So we have come up with what we think is an awesome alternative to the Creed Take Me Higher clip, but I'm not going to debut it until Bills Rams. So if you want to see this awesome alternative that we have come up with, it's still the Take Me Higher player of the game. The words Take Me Higher are still in the snippet. We've come up with an awesome alternative, but you're going to have to tune in to the Bills Rams pregame in order to see it. I'm not going to bust out my starters.
That's what we call a tease.
So we're just going to do the Take Me Higher player of the game today without a little video promo. And we're going to change sort of the rules around this superlative. So Dave, who is one player you want to see elevate their game and take themselves higher and secure a spot on the 53-man roster?
It's funny because when I initially wrote down my notes, we have the wild card player obviously coming up, and we have the Take Me Higher player. And originally I had these 2 guys, and then I decided to flip them, right? I decided to flip them, and I made my Take Me Higher player the wild card player, and I made the wild card player my Take Me Higher player. And that Take Me Higher player now for me is Isaiah Hodgins. And so kind of going along with the theme of how you just wrapped up on the special teams, like, can Isaiah Hodgins, who we expect to get a ton of playing time, really make an impact with the pads on in real game situation with somewhat competent quarterback play, whether it's Case Keenum or Matt Barkley, knowing that he's likely going to be on the field a ton this game, given that guys like Isaiah McKenzie probably aren't going to play much of at all. Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis probably not going to play much of at all. Remains to be seen, like, what kind of run Jamison Crowder is going to get. But, like, Isaiah Hodgins, Jake Kumaro, Khalil Shakir, Tanner, like, Isaiah Hodgins can separate himself and put his best foot forward in this game, and a chance where he's going to get a lot of playing time to be the Take Me Higher player of the game and really lead this team in receiving. I think in this game, he has a real chance to do that.
So now I got to call an audible here, because Isaiah Hodgins was also my Take Me Higher player of the game, and we're not allowed to repeat. And I didn't have a backup, so I'm going to be doing this one off the top of my head. But I had some I had to go back in because obviously I'm a huge fan of Isaiah Hodgins, 6'3", 200 pounds. He can play the boundary. He can play the slot. I think he plays a valuable role in this football team. I had to go back and I had to look up this stat because I didn't have it on hand on the last show, and I wanted to have it on hand for this show for Isaiah Hodgins. SIS in college, his red zone statistics, one of my favorite college statistics that we dug up a couple of years ago. Thanks to the fine folks at Cover One. We saw it in a tweet from the Cover One people before we were part of this network. Isaiah Hodgins in the red zone. This is his career red zone statistics in college per SIS. 29 targets. 22 of those 29 targets were catchable footballs. Of those 22 catchable footballs, he had 21 catches. Of those 21 catches, 16 of them were touchdowns. He had 0 drops. He had 18 first downs or touchdowns on those 22 catches. The man was an absolute menace in the red zone at Oregon State. And I just want that on my football team. I want it. I want it so bad on my football team. And I'm rooting for Isaiah Hodgins, and I hope that he can ball out in the preseason and he can make the football team. So he's not my take me higher player of the game because you took him, but I just wanted to throw that statistic out there. I'm going to go with Damar Hamlin. And the reason for that is because we have seen this training camp, what life could be like without Micah Hyde. We had a real scary couple hours there. And then what life could be like without Jordan Poyer. And we had another real couple really scary hours there. And obviously Jordan Poyer is on that expiring contract. I could say Jaquan Johnson, he's on the expiring contract as well. And I just don't know if Jaquan Johnson, as good of and as a heady football player as he is, I just don't know if he has the athletic makeup to be a successful full-time starter in this league like a guy like Damar Hamlin does. So I'm going to go with Damar Hamlin. I want to see that year 2 progression. I want to see him making plays. I want to feel comfortable that if Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer have to miss significant time this year, or if Jordan Poyer does not get extended past the 2022 season, that a guy like Damar Hamlin is a legitimate option for this football team. So my take me higher player is going to be Damar Hamlin. And I guess that kind of defeated the purpose of the segment because I said to Shakir spot on the 53-man roster and he's already secured it, but I had to call an audible there.
Hey, that's fine.
All right. So the next up is the wild card player. And again, we're gonna tweak it a little bit, but we have the wild card clip that we can play.
Guys, why aren't the brakes working? Because I cut the brakes! Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
So who is going to be the surprise player of this football game? Who's the guy who on Monday when we do this show, everyone's going to want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say Christian Benford just because I know he's going to play a lot, but I think that he's going to step up to the challenge and the love that he's been getting in training camp. And for those, fans who maybe don't pay as much attention to training camp and kind of wait for the regular season to come around, I think they're going to get a taste of what Christian Benford can offer in this game, whether it's in rotation, with Dane Jackson and Kyrie Elam, that's fine. But I think that his claim to fame from college was his ball hawking skills, right? And his ability to turn the ball over. I think he had 15 career interceptions in college at Nova. So I think that he could make a play in that vein where he could make make a key interception at some point in this game that could sort of, and the wins and losses don't really matter in the preseason, but it could be, an important step for him in kind of like validating the reports that he's been getting from the beat and from everyone else kind of singing his praises. So I'll go with Christian Benford, and kind of now you see how it sort of makes sense with how I originally had Benford as my take me higher player and Hodgins as a wild card, and then I flipped them around. I think you could probably still do that. I think either way it makes sense. So I'll just go with it.
My wild card, I wanted to go with Quentin Morris, but I ended up not because I feel like one of these other two players is going to statistically have themselves a pretty decent game. And I think people are going to be talking about him. So my wild card player is either Tanner Gentry or Neil Pau'u. I think that they're going to get a ton of run in this football game because of our shortage at receiver. They already showed sort of in that blue-red scrimmage that they have a pretty solid connection with Matt Barkley. Both their names were mentioned in a number of articles that were circulated after that blue-red scrimmage. Hey, Tanner Gentry had a great day. Neil Pau'u finally started to click, etc. So Matt Barkley, might be tossing the ball a little bit in the second half. Both those guys are going to get a lot of run. somebody is going to be on Twitter Saturday afternoon, if it's Neil Pau'u, saying that Neil Pau'u is going to make the roster. Hot take.
Yep.
Like someone's going to be on Twitter doing that on Saturday afternoon. I can almost guarantee it. If he goes off and has like a touchdown or something, that you'll see it. You will see it. I tweeted some college highlights of Neil Pau'u the other day, and it got way more likes than it should have. It got like 500 likes. All right. Up next is the Respect You player of the game. That is the player on the opposing team that the Buffalo Bills have to respect.
I pure, straight hate you. But God damn it, do I respect you.
So normally, again, we would be talking about DeForest Buckner or Matt Ryan or Michael Pittman or Jonathan Taylor, but this is the preseason, so we're going to amend this superlative to one player on the Colts you're looking forward to seeing. Likely that's going to be a young player because the starters are not going to get a lot of run. So who's someone you're looking forward to seeing?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I kind of cheated on this one, and you mentioned it. We're draft guys. We love the draft on this show. I'm excited to see pretty much mostly the entire rookie class that the Colts had, right?
100%.
Whether it's Bernard Raymond at left tackle, well, it's Alec Pierce, the receiver, Jelani Woods, the tight end, Nick Cross at safety. I'm really looking forward to seeing all these guys, notably Alec Pierce, because what it means for the Bills as far as matchups with guys like Kyrie Elam and Benford and testing them, and Nick Cross, right? I think Nick Cross is a guy that kind of fell in the draft a bit, was, there were some different opinions on him as to whether he was like maybe second round type talent or, fourth, fifth round type talent. But I think he slipped, and the Colts got some really good value out of drafting him. And, per the reports coming again out of the Colts beat is he's making a name for himself in camp, and he's knocking some heads around. So the Bills receivers like Hodgins and Gentry and Pau'u are going to be, potentially playing while Nick Cross is in the game for the Colts. Need to have their head on a swivel because he is going to be trying to make a name for himself as well, just like the guys on the Bills are. So really overall, I'm looking forward to seeing the entire rookie class of the Colts on the field, but really Pierce and Cross are the two guys that I'm really excited to see.
I mean, Kari Willis's surprise retirement at such a young age, put Nick Cross right into the starting lineup. And he's apparently, according to most reports, taking full advantage of it. So he's going to be fun to watch. Alec Pierce versus Kyrie Elam, Dane Jackson will be fun to watch. My guy, Michael Strawn, isn't playing. He's got a knee injury. But Jelani Woods versus Terrell Bernard could be an interesting matchup. I don't think Naheem Hines or Jonathan Taylor are going to get much playing time, if at all. But Phillip Lindsay, maybe on a wheel route versus Terrell Bernard, might be something interesting to keep an eye on. But I'm not going to go with any of those guys because you know me, I love me some UDFAs. I am still mad. I am still salty. This guy did not get drafted. I understand why. He's 25 years old and he's got a history of knee injuries. I understand why he wasn't drafted, but man, could Jojo Bowman be a steal for the Indianapolis Colts. And I think he's a guy who's going to make some plays in the second half of this football game at one of their two linebacker spots. He's a Matt Milano clone. I love Jojo Bowman in his time at Nebraska. Like I said, the age and the injuries maybe are making the NFL sleep on him, but if he's healthy, I think Jojo Bowman is going to be a really solid football player in this league. And I think the Colts got an absolute bargain as a UDFA. So my eyes are on Jojo Bowman in the second half of that football game. All right. That leads us to our final superlative of the evening, our hot take.
Oh my God! We're having a fire sale! Oh, the burning! It burns me! Evacuate all the school children! Oh, mate! This isn't a fever! Sing, Greg! Can't even see where the knob is!
So what is something you can see in this game? Obviously, a hot take. Matt Barkley throws for 4 touchdowns. Who cares? Right? What's something we could see in this game that really surprises us or piques our interest? What's one hot take you got from this game?
Well, you can tell we've been doing shows together for a long time because my hot take was kind of like almost something you almost directly already mentioned, and I was trying to like hide
Is it
my
Raheem
expression.
Blackshear?
No, it's not Raheem
Okay.
Blackshear because I'm not. But it relates to something you already mentioned. My hot
Yeah.
take was that either Tanner Gentry or Neil Pau will score a game-winning touchdown late in the game from Matt
I like
Barkley.
it.
And I, like you
The
said,
Brandon Rileys of the world.
yes, one of those two guys, if not both, will have a big impact in the second half of the game. And I think, like, for whatever you want to say, like if you like to bet on the preseason, good for you. The score ultimately is not going to matter in this game, but I'll just throw it out there. They'll catch a game-winning touchdown late in the game.
I might go in there and I might look at some of the prop bets on Matt Barkley. Because, like, if it's like 180 yards passing, I might smash the over. Because I think he's going to play a ton of this football game. So that'll be interesting. My hot take, I like yours because obviously I utilized that earlier for my my wild card. My hot take is that Raheem Blackshear becomes a certified dog in Bills Mafia after this game. I think you're going to see him get run at running back. I think you're going to see him catching balls out of the backfield in the second half. I think you'll see him returning kicks and punts. He's also a 4-phase special teamer, so he'll be playing other roles as well. Maybe be that personal protector on some punts. Raheem Blackshear is going to get a ton of run this preseason, a ton of run in this game. I think that Saturday night, one of the talking points that we have heading into Monday will be Raheem Blackshear. Could he push Taiwan Jones off the roster? So Raheem Blackshear is going to be my hot take. I think he's just going to play everywhere and he's going to make some plays. And he's going to turn some heads for some people. So, ladies and gentlemen, we did it just over an hour. I'm proud of us. We weren't here for 2 hours. I don't know if the people could handle that, especially without them being able to get their comments in. We missed you guys. We wish we could have been here Saturday morning or this morning to read your guys' comments and to sort of bring in the new season along with you. We're going to be live almost every other preseason game, maybe a regular season game, maybe not so much all of the preseason just because our schedules are a little bit still busy. The wives still own us until the regular season kicks off is what my wife likes to say. So, ladies and gentlemen, reminder, you can catch our regular show Monday nights, 9 p.m. We'll be reacting to Bills Colts and we'll be live. So you can, hit us up in the comments section and get your talking points in. So any final thoughts before we head out of here, Dave?
No, I just hope that we come out of this game, injury free and we get to see, some of the things that we had talked about. I'm excited to see, it's a different feel, right? You're excited to see sort of the bottom of the roster guys battle it out. Whereas in years past, when we weren't as good, you were just hoping someone was going to flash and make a name for themselves. So it's a nice feeling now to kind of go into it with this perspective.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?